The red lights flashed across the bridge of the UES Defiant as another explosion rocked the massive warship. Admiral Kate Murphy gripped the command rail, her knuckles white as she watched the tactical display show yet another human ship going dark. The Third Fleet was dying around her, just like the Second Fleet had died at Titan 3 months ago, and the First Fleet had died at Alpha Centauri before that. "Admiral, we have lost contact with the Ranger and the Liberty," reported Lieutenant Commander Amy Clark from her station. Her voice was steady, but Kate could hear the pain beneath the professional tone. "They had all lost too many friends in this war," Kate nodded grimly. 15 years of war had taught her not to show emotion when good people died. The crew needed to see strength, even when she felt nothing but despair. "Signal the remaining ships to fall back to the secondary rendezvous point. We cannot win this battle." 3 decks below, Jack Morrison wiped grease from his hands and looked at the damage report scrolling across his engineering terminal. The Defiant had taken 17 direct hits from Zephyrian plasma weapons. 2 of her main reactors were offline, and the port shield generators were completely destroyed. By all rights, they should be dead already. Jack was 28 years old and had spent the last 6 years of his life fighting a war that humanity was losing badly. He had joined the fleet as a young engineer, full of hope and determination. Now he was one of the few original crew members still alive on the Defiant. Most of his friends were buried in space or on dead worlds that the Zephyrians had burned. The Zephyrians were not like humans. They stood 9 feet tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished metal. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, and their technology centuries ahead of anything humans had built. When they had first appeared at the edge of human space, Earth's leaders had tried to negotiate. The Zephyrians had responded by destroying the entire colony on Kepler 442b. 2 million people had died in the first hour of contact. Jack pulled up the technical readouts from their latest encounter with Zephyrian ships. Their plasma weapons could punch through human shields like they were made of paper. Their own shields seemed to absorb everything humans threw at them. Missiles, railgun rounds, laser batteries, nothing seemed to work. The few times human ships had managed to damage Zephyrian vessels, it had taken overwhelming numbers to do it. Numbers that humanity no longer had. "Morrison, get up here," came the voice of Chief Engineer Lisa Thompson over the com. "We need to discuss the reactor repairs." Jack made his way through the corridors of the Defiant, passing crew members who looked as tired and beaten as he felt. These were good people, brave people, but they had been fighting an impossible war for too long. He could see it in their eyes. They were starting to believe that defeat was inevitable. The engineering bay was a maze of pipes, conduits, and machinery that kept the great ship running. Lisa Thompson stood beside the main reactor assembly, her uniform stained with coolant fluid. She was 45 years old and had been chief engineer for 8 years. Jack respected her more than any other officer on the ship. "The port reactor is completely shot," Lisa said without looking up from her diagnostic pad. "We can get the starboard unit back online, but it will take at least 12 hours. The shield generators are going to need completely new power couplings." Jack nodded and began running his own diagnostics. As he worked, his mind wandered to the bigger picture. The war was not going well. Actually, that was putting it mildly. The war was a disaster. Humanity had lost 70% of its colonies. Earth itself was now within striking distance of the Zephyrian fleet. The government had already begun evacuating the most important people to secret bases in the outer system. "Lisa, can I ask you something?" Jack said as he calibrated a power coupling. "Sure, kid, what is it? Do you think we can win this war?" Lisa stopped working and looked at him. Her expression was serious. "Honestly, no, not the way we are fighting it now. The Zephyrians are just too advanced. Every battle we fight, we lose more ships than we can replace. Every colony that falls, we lose more people. We are being ground down, piece by piece." Jack had suspected as much, but hearing it said out loud made it real. "So what do? We keep fighting," Lisa said firmly, "because the alternative is extinction. Even if we cannot win, we can make them pay for every human life they take." "Maybe that will be enough," But Jack was not satisfied with that answer. He had been studying the Zephyrian technology every chance he got, analyzing wreckage from their ships, reviewing combat footage, looking for any weakness that could be exploited. Most of his colleagues thought he was wasting his time. The Zephyrians were simply too advanced, they said. Humans were like cavemen trying to fight jet fighters, but Jack had noticed something that others had missed. The Zephyrians were advanced, yes, but their technology was specialized. Their weapons were energy-based, their shields were energy-based, their sensors were energy-based. They had built their entire military around energy manipulation and control. It was incredibly sophisticated, far beyond anything humans could build, but it was also potentially vulnerable. Jack had been working on a theory for months, but he had not shared it with anyone. It seemed too crazy, too desperate, too unlikely to work, but as he stood in the engineering bay of a dying ship, surrounded by the sounds of a losing war, he decided that crazy and desperate might be exactly what humanity needed. "Lisa, I need to show you something," Jack said. "But you have to promise to keep an open mind." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Jack, I've been an engineer for 25 years. I have seen every crazy idea that desperate people can come up with. Show me what you have got." Jack pulled up a holographic display on his workstation. The image showed a Zephyrian cruiser rotating slowly so that all its systems were visible. "Look at this ship." "Really look at it. What do you see?" Lisa studied the display. "I see a ship that is faster, better armed, and better protected than anything we have. I see the enemy that is killing us." "Look deeper," Jack insisted. "Look at the power distribution, the system integration, the way everything is connected. What do you see?" Lisa looked more carefully. After a few minutes, she began to frown. "The power systems are incredibly complex. Everything is linked together through their main energy grid. It is like their entire ship is one giant electrical circuit." "Exactly," Jack said. "And what happens to a complex electrical circuit when you hit it with a massive electromagnetic pulse?" Lisa stared at him. "It overloads. It shuts down." "But Jack, we do not have EMP weapons powerful enough to affect their ships. We tried that in the early days of the war. Their shields absorb electromagnetic energy just like everything else." "We tried military EMP weapons," Jack corrected. "But what if we did not use military technology? What if we used something else entirely?" Before Lisa could ask what he meant, the ship's alarm began to sound. The Zephyrians had found them again. Jack felt the familiar knot of fear in his stomach as he realized that once again they would have to run or die. But this time, as he prepared for another retreat, he also felt something else. For the first time in years, he felt hope, because he had an idea that might change everything. The alarm stopped blaring 2 hours later when the Defiant jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Zephyrian patrol behind. Jack Morrison found himself in the ship's main laboratory with Lieutenant Commander Amy Clark, the science officer. She was 32 years old, with short brown hair and tired eyes that had seen too much death. Amy had agreed to look at Jack's research, though she seemed skeptical. "Show me what you have," Amy said, crossing her arms as she leaned against the lab. Table. Jack activated the holographic display system. 3-dimensional images of Zephyrian ships filled the air between them. He had spent months collecting this data from battle recordings, wreckage analysis, and intelligence reports. "Look at their power signatures during combat. Notice anything strange?" Amy studied the displays carefully. As a science officer, she was trained to spot patterns that others might miss. After several minutes, she pointed to a series of energy readings. "Their power output fluctuates in a very specific pattern. It is almost like a heartbeat." "Exactly," Jack said, pulling up more data. "Every Zephyrian ship has the same pattern. Their entire power grid pulses in sync. It is not random. It is deliberate. Why would they design their ships that way?" Amy asked that Jack manipulated the display to show internal schematics that he had pieced together from damaged enemy vessels. "Because their technology is based on harmonic energy resonance. All their systems work together like instruments in an orchestra. Their weapons, shields, engines, everything is synchronized to the same frequency." Amy looked confused. That sounds incredibly advanced. How does that help us? Because, Jack said with growing excitement, if all their systems are synchronized, then they are all vulnerable to the same type of interference. If we can disrupt their harmonic frequency, we can shut down their entire ship at once. But we have tried electromagnetic warfare before, Amy protested. Their shields absorb EMP blasts like they absorb everything else. Jack grinned. We tried. Military EMP weapons. But what if we did not use military technology at all? What if we used something completely different? He pulled up a new set of displays showing civilian mining equipment. Look at this. This is a standard asteroid mining laser. It uses focused electromagnetic energy to break apart rock. And this, he pointed to another image, is an industrial fabricator. It uses electromagnetic fields to shape metal. Neither of these is weapons, but both generate massive amounts of electromagnetic energy. Amy began to understand. You want to use civilian equipment as weapons? Not as weapons, Jack corrected, as jammers. If we can generate enough electromagnetic interference at the right frequency, we can disrupt their harmonic resonance. Their shields will not absorb it because they are not designed to handle that specific type of interference. Hey, Jack, this is completely theoretical, Amy said. We do not even know what their exact frequency is. Actually, we do. Jack pulled up recordings from the recent battle. I have been analyzing their power signatures for months. The frequency is 847.3 terahertz, plus or minus 0.2. Every single Zephyrian ship operates at exactly the same frequency. Amy stared at the data. Even if you are right, the amount of power you would need to generate that kind of interference would be enormous. We would need dozens of ships working together. Hundreds, Jack agreed. But we have hundreds of civilian ships, mining vessels, cargo haulers, passenger transports. Most of them are sitting empty in shipyards because it is too dangerous to use them. But if we could modify them... This is insane, Amy said, but Jack could see that she was thinking about it seriously. Even if the theory is correct, the modifications would be incredibly complex. We would need to rewire entire ships, install new power systems, coordinate hundreds of vessels to work together. It would take months. We do not have months, Jack said quietly. The Zephyrians are 3 weeks away from Earth, but maybe we do not need months. Maybe we just need to prove the concept works. Amy was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. What do you need from me? Help me present this to the captain. He needs to hear this from both of us, not just from an engineer with a crazy idea. 30 minutes later, Jack and Amy stood in Captain Ben Rodriguez's ready room. The captain was a veteran of 12 years of war, and his face showed every one of those years. He listened carefully as Jack explained his theory, occasionally asking technical questions that showed he understood the implications. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Captain Rodriguez said when Jack finished. You want to turn civilian mining ships into giant electromagnetic jammers, coordinate them to work together, and use them to disrupt enemy ships that have been defeating our best warships for 15 years. Yes, sir, Jack said. And you think this will work because you have analyzed their power signatures and determined that their technology is vulnerable to a specific type of interference that we can generate using modified civilian equipment. Yes, sir, Captain Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. Morrison, do you realize how crazy this sounds? Yes, sir. But crazy might be exactly what we need right now. The captain looked at Amy. Commander Clark, what is your assessment? Amy took a deep breath. Sir, the theory is sound. The Zephyrians do use harmonic energy resonance, and their systems are synchronized. If we could generate the right type of interference, it would theoretically disrupt their operations. But the practical challenges are enormous. Could it work? The captain asked directly. It might work, Amy said carefully. But it would require perfect coordination, enormous amounts of power, and a lot of luck. Captain Rodriguez stood up and walked to the window that looked out into space. The remnants of the Third Fleet were visible in the distance, limping toward the rendezvous point. We lost 18 ships today. Good ships with good crews. At this rate, we will not have a fleet left in 6 months. He turned back to Jack and Amy. The traditional approach is not working. We need something new, something the enemy does not expect. Morrison, I am going to give you a chance to test your theory, but just a test. I want to see if this interference effect actually works before we commit to anything larger. Jack felt his heart racing. What kind of test, sir? There is a Zephyrian patrol ship that has been harassing our supply convoys in the Vega system. It is alone, separated from the main fleet. If your theory is correct, it should be vulnerable to this electromagnetic interference. Sir, we would need to modify at least 3 ships to generate enough power, Jack said. Then modify 3 ships, the captain replied. I will give you the mining vessel Iron Duke and 2 cargo haulers that are currently empty. You have 72 hours to make your modifications and test your theory. Amy looked concerned. Captain, if this fails, we will lose 3 more ships. Commander, if we do nothing, we will lose the war, Captain Rodriguez said firmly. Morrison, can you do this? Jack thought about everything that would need to be done. The power systems would need to be completely rewired. The electromagnetic generators would need to be calibrated to the exact frequency. The ships would need to coordinate their efforts perfectly. It was an enormous task for such a short time. I can do it, Jack said, but I will need help, a lot of help. You will have whatever you need, the captain promised. Personnel, equipment, resources. This is now a priority mission. As Jack and Amy left the ready room, Amy grabbed his arm. Jack, you realize that if this does not work, it will not just be a failed experiment. People will die. People are already dying, Jack replied. Every day we fight this war the old way, more people die. Maybe it is time to try something new. And if you are wrong? Jack looked out at the stars, thinking of all the human worlds that had already fallen, all the colonies that had been destroyed, all the friends he had lost. Then we die trying something different instead of dying doing the same thing over and over again. Amy nodded slowly. All right, let us go change the war. The mining vessel Iron Duke had seen better days. Jack Morrison stood in its cargo bay, looking at the massive electromagnetic mining laser that would need to be completely rebuilt. The ship was 50 years old, built for breaking apart asteroids, not for fighting wars. But if his theory was correct, it might be more effective against Zephyrian ships than the newest military cruiser. This is going to be a lot of work, said Chief Engineer Lisa Thompson, who had volunteered to help with the modifications. She ran her hand along the mining laser's power coupling. We need to increase the output by at least 300% and completely change the frequency modulation. Jack nodded as he studied the technical specifications. The Iron Duke was built tough. Her power core can handle the increased load, but we will need to reroute everything through new control systems. Maria Santos, the ship's original pilot, watched them work. She was a woman in her 40s who had spent 20 years mining asteroids before the war made her job too dangerous. I still think you are all crazy, she said. But crazy is better than dead, I suppose. The next 18 hours were a blur of cutting, welding, and rewiring. Jack's team worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and determination. Frank Davis, a retired shipbuilder, had joined them along with a dozen other volunteers. Frank was 60 years old and had built civilian ships for 30 years before the war destroyed the shipbuilding industry. I never thought I would be turning a mining ship into a weapon, Frank said as he installed a new power distribution system. But these are strange times. It is not really a weapon, Jack corrected. It is more like a giant radio jammer. We are not trying to destroy their ship. We are trying to confuse it. The 2 cargo haulers, the Liberty Bell and the New Hope, were undergoing similar modifications in nearby bays. Each ship had a different type of electromagnetic generator, but they all needed to be synchronized to work together. Captain Joe, right, who owned the Liberty Bell, had been skeptical at first. I have been running cargo for 15 years, Joe had said when Jack first explained the plan. I know ships, and I know what they can do. What you are asking for sounds impossible. But as the work progressed, Joe began to see the potential. Maybe it is not about what the ships can do, he said as he helped install a new frequency modulator. Maybe it is about what the enemy does not expect. The biggest challenge was not technical but psychological. Word of the project had spread through the fleet, and not everyone was supportive. Colonel Steve Adams, the fleet's senior tactical officer, had made his opinion clear during a meeting with Captain Rodriguez. This is a waste of time and resources, Adams had argued. We should be focusing on conventional tactics, not chasing. After fantasy solutions. Morrison is an engineer, not a military strategist. But Captain Rodriguez had backed Jack's project, and that was enough to keep the work going. Still, Jack could feel the pressure. If the test failed, it would not just be his career on the line. It would be proof that humanity's situation was truly hopeless. On the second day, Jack received unexpected help. Commander Amy Clark arrived with a team of science officers and a portable computer lab. I ran some additional calculations, she said. The frequency synchronization is even more critical than we thought. All three ships need to pulse within 0.03 seconds of each other, or the interference pattern will not work. Can we do that? Jack asked. We can try, Amy replied. I have written a coordination program that should keep all three ships synchronized. But it will require precise timing and constant communication between the ships. The work continued through the night. Jack found himself crawling through maintenance tunnels, rewiring power systems that had been designed for completely different purposes. His hands were cut and bruised, his uniform was stained with coolant and grease, but he kept working. Jack, you need to sleep, Lisa said when she found him still working at 3 a.m. You have been awake for 36 hours. I can sleep when this is done, Jack replied. We only have one more day. You will not be much good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion, Lisa pointed out. Get some rest, we can handle the final calibrations. But Jack could not rest. Too much depended on getting everything perfect. He had studied the Zephyrian power signatures for months, but all his analysis would be worthless if they could not generate the right interference pattern. The final day was even more intense. The three ships had to be moved to a secure testing area where they could coordinate without risking the rest of the fleet. Jack stood on the bridge of the Iron Duke, watching dozens of technicians make final adjustments to the electromagnetic generators. Power output is at 97%. Reported Maria Santos from the pilot's seat. All systems are green. Liberty Bell is ready, came Joe Wright's voice over the communication system. New Hope is also ready. Jack looked at Amy, who was monitoring the synchronization program. Are we ready? As ready as we can be, Amy replied. The target ship is holding position in the test zone. It is a captured Zephyrian drone, so there is no crew at risk. Jack took a deep breath. Everything they had worked for came down to this moment. All ships prepared to begin the test. Remember, we need to maintain the interference pattern for at least 30 seconds to see if it works. The captured Zephyrian drone was a small scout ship that had been disabled in an earlier battle. It had been repaired just enough to run its basic systems, making it a perfect test target. If Jack's theory was correct, the electromagnetic interference would shut down the drone's power grid. Beginning interference in 3.2.1. Now, Jack said. The Iron Duke's mining laser came to life, but instead of the focused beam used for cutting asteroids, it generated a wide-spectrum electromagnetic pulse. The Liberty Bell and New Hope added their own generators to the mix, creating a complex interference pattern that filled the space around the drone. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. The drone continued to drift through space, its systems apparently unaffected. Jack felt his heart sinking. Had he been wrong? Had he wasted their precious time on a theory that did not work? Then, at 15 seconds, the drone's lights began to flicker. At 20 seconds, its engines shut down. At 25 seconds, every system on the ship went dark. It worked, Amy said quietly. It actually worked. Jack stared at the disabled drone, hardly believing what he was seeing. How long until it comes back online? Sensors show no power generation, reported Maria. The drone is completely dead. Over the communication system, Joe Wright's voice was filled with amazement. I cannot believe it. We just shut down a Zephyrian ship with mining equipment. But Jack was already thinking about the next step. This was just one small drone. Real Zephyrian warship would be much more heavily shielded. We would need more ships, more power, and better coordination. How many ships? Amy asked. Jack did some quick calculations. For a cruiser-sized vessel, we would need at least 20 ships. For a battleship, maybe 50. And they would all need to work together perfectly. That is a lot of coordination. Lisa said, a lot of things that could go wrong. But it can work, Jack said with growing confidence. We just proved it can work. Now we need to convince the Fleet Command to give us the resources to do it on a larger scale. As they headed back to the main fleet, Jack felt something he had not experienced in years. Hope. For the first time since the war began, humanity had a weapon that could hurt the Zephyrians. It was not a better gun or a stronger shield. It was an idea, a new way of thinking about an old problem, but he also knew that the real test was still to come. They would need to convince the military leadership to commit hundreds of ships and thousands of people to an untested strategy. And even if they succeeded, they would still be facing an enemy that had been winning the war for 15 years. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Jack Morrison believed that humanity might actually have a chance to win it. General Paul Mitchell stood in the war room aboard the command ship Valiant, staring at the holographic display that showed the Zephyrian fleet approaching Earth. 300 enemy ships moved through space in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready to finish what they had started 15 years ago. In 6 days, they would reach the outer planets. In 10 days, they would be at Earth itself. The evacuation is proceeding as planned, reported Colonel Steve Adams. We have moved the government leadership and essential personnel to the backup facilities in the Kuiper Belt. The civilian population is being relocated to the underground shelters. General Mitchell nodded but kept his eyes on the display. The human fleet had been reduced to 87 ships, most of them damaged from recent battles. Against 300 fresh Zephyrian vessels, they would last perhaps 30 minutes in a conventional fight. Sir, Admiral Morrison is here to see you, announced his aide. Jack Morrison entered the war room, still wearing his engineering uniform despite his recent promotion to admiral. He was followed by Amy Clark, now a full commander, and Maria Santos, who had been given the temporary rank of captain for this mission. Admiral Morrison, General Mitchell said formally, I understand you have a proposal for us. Yes, sir, Jack replied. We have assembled a fleet of 237 civilian ships. Mining vessels, cargo haulers, passenger transports, even some old pleasure craft. They have all been modified with electromagnetic generators based on our successful test. Colonel Adams looked skeptical. Admiral, these are civilian ships operated by civilian crews. They have no military training, no combat experience. You are asking them to face the most dangerous enemy humanity has ever encountered. I am asking them to save their species, Jack replied calmly. Every person who volunteered for this mission understands the risks. They also understand that this might be our only chance. General Mitchell studied the tactical display that showed Jack's proposed battle plan. You want to position these civilian ships in a defensive grid around Earth. When the Zephyrian fleet arrives, they will activate their electromagnetic generators simultaneously and disable the enemy ships. That is the basic plan, yes, sir? Jack confirmed, but it is more complex than that. We need to coordinate the activation sequence so that the interference patterns overlap correctly. If even one ship is out of position or mistimed, the entire operation could fail. And if it succeeds? General Mitchell asked. Then we shut down their entire fleet, Jack said. Without power, their ships will be helpless. Our remaining military vessels can move in and capture or destroy them. Maria Santos stepped forward. General, I've been talking to the civilian captains. They are scared, but they are also angry. They have watched their homes destroyed, their families killed. They want to fight back. These people are not soldiers, Colonel Adams protested. They are farmers, miners, merchants. They have no business in a military operation. With respect, sir, Jack said, this is not a military operation. This is a desperate last stand by ordinary people who refuse to give up. Sometimes that is more powerful than any military force. General Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Admiral Morrison, your test with the drone was impressive. But the Zephyrians are not stupid. They will adapt their tactics when they see what we are trying to do. They might spread their ships out, or attack from multiple directions, or simply retreat and wait for us to make a mistake. You are right, sir, Jack agreed. That is why we need to make this work on the first try. We will not get a second chance. What do you need from me? The general asked. Full authority to position the civilian fleet as needed. Coordination with our remaining military ships, and most importantly, complete communications silence until the moment we spring the trap. If the Zephyrians detect our preparations, they will change their approach. General Mitchell looked at the display showing the approaching enemy fleet. 300 ships carrying enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Against them, humanity would field fewer than 90 military vessels and more than 200. Civilian ships operated by people who had never been in a battle. You realize that if this fails, we lose everything, the general said. The fleet, the civilian volunteers, and probably Earth itself. Sir, if we do nothing, we lose everything. Anyway, Jack replied. At least this way we go down fighting. The general nodded slowly. Very well, you have full authority to proceed. God help us all. 3 days later, Jack stood on the bridge of the Iron Duke watching the final preparations. The civilian fleet was spread across a vast area of space, each ship precisely positioned according to the battle plan. The crews had been training non-stop, practicing the coordination sequences that would be essential for success. All ships report ready, announced Amy Clark from the communications station. The Zephyrian fleet will be in range in approximately 4 hours. Jack looked at the tactical display. The enemy ships were approaching exactly as predicted, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea that 237 civilian ships were waiting for them, hidden among the asteroids and debris of the outer system. Maria! How are the crews holding up? Jack asked. As well as can be expected, Maria replied. Some are terrified, some are excited, most are both, but they are all determined to see this through. Jack opened a communication channel to the entire civilian. Fleet, this is Admiral Morrison. In a few hours, we will face the enemy that has been destroying our worlds for 15 years. Today, we show them that humanity will not go quietly into the night. Today, we prove that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they stand. Together, good luck to all of you. The waiting was the hardest part. Jack paced the bridge, checking and rechecking the coordination systems. Everything had to work perfectly. The electromagnetic generators had to activate at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right sequence. One mistake would doom the entire operation. Enemy fleet is now in sensor range, reported Amy. They are maintaining their standard formation. 3 battleships in the center, cruisers and destroyers in escort positions. Any sign that they have detected us? Jack asked. Negative. They appear to be proceeding normally toward Earth. Jack felt a moment of doubt. What if his theory was wrong? What if the larger Zephyrian ships had better shielding than the small drone they had tested? What if the enemy had found a way to counter the electromagnetic interference? Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian fleet, Amy announced. They are demanding surrender. Let them demand, Jack said grimly. In 30 minutes, they will get their answer. The Zephyrian fleet moved into the trap with the confidence of predators who had never faced serious opposition. Their ships were beautiful in a deadly way, sleek and powerful, crackling with the energy weapons that had terrorized humanity for so long. All ships prepare for activation, Jack announced. Remember, we need to maintain the interference pattern for at least 60 seconds. Do not break formation no matter what happens. The civilian ships powered up their electromagnetic generators. 237 vessels, operated by people who had never been soldiers, prepared to face the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy. Activation in 10 seconds, Jack said. 5. 4.4.2. Now, the space around. The Zephyrian fleet erupted with electromagnetic energy. Every civilian ship activated its generators at exactly the same moment, creating a massive interference pattern that washed over the enemy formation like an invisible tsunami for a moment. Nothing happened. The Zephyrian ships continued their advance, apparently unaffected. Jack felt his heart sinking. Had they failed? Then, one by one, the enemy ships began to go dark. Their weapons powered down, their shields collapsed, their engines shut off. In less than a minute, the entire Zephyrian fleet was drifting helplessly through space, their advanced technology rendered useless by the electromagnetic storm created by mining lasers and cargo haulers. "It worked," Amy said in amazement. "It actually worked." Jack opened a channel to the human military fleet. "This is Admiral Morrison. The enemy is disabled. Move in and secure the ships. And someone get me a communication line to the Zephyrian flagship. I think it is time we had a conversation." The Zephyrian flagship drifted silently through space, its once mighty engines cold and dark. Jack Morrison stood in the airlock of a boarding shuttle, wearing a pressure suit and carrying nothing more threatening than a communication device. Behind him, a small team of Marines waited nervously. They were about to board an enemy ship for the first time in 15 years of war. "Are you sure about this, Admiral?" asked Captain Mike Torres, the Marine commander. "These ships could power back up at any moment. The electromagnetic interference is still active," Jack replied. "Their ships will stay dead as long as we maintain the field. Besides, we need to understand their technology if we want to end this war permanently." The airlock cycled open, and Jack stepped into the Zephyrian ship. The corridors were larger than human ships, built for creatures that stood 9 feet tall. The walls were covered with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dim emergency lighting. Everything felt alien and wrong. They found the bridge after 20 minutes of searching. The Zephyrian commander stood in the center of the room, his 4 arms crossed in what appeared to be a gesture of defeat. He was even taller than Jack had expected, with skin that looked like polished silver and eyes that glowed with their own inner light. "I am Admiral Jack Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet," Jack said, hoping his translation device was working properly. "I am here to discuss terms." The Zephyrian commander spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "I am Flea, Commander Zethka of the Zephyrian Empire. You have achieved something that we believed impossible. How did you disable our ships?" "The same way humans have always survived," Jack replied. "By adapting when others could not?" Zethka tilted his head in what might have been curiosity. "Your species fights in ways we do not understand. We have conquered 47 different worlds, 47 different species. All of them fought with weapons and ships. You fight with ideas." "Ideas are the most powerful weapons in the universe," Jack said. "Now let me explain what happens next. Your fleet is disabled, but not destroyed. Your crews are alive, but helpless. We can keep you powerless indefinitely, or we can discuss a peaceful resolution to this war." The negotiations took place over the next 3 days. Representatives from both species met aboard the human command ship, working out the details of what would become known as the Treaty of Terra. The Zephyrians had been so confident in their technological superiority that the defeat at Earth had shattered their entire military doctrine. "We do not understand how you defeated us," admitted Zethka during one of the sessions. "Our ships are more advanced, our weapons more powerful, our shields stronger. By every measure we should have won this battle easily. You forgot the most important factor," replied General Mitchell, who had taken charge of the formal negotiations. "You forgot that humans do not give up. Even when we are outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched, we keep fighting. We keep thinking, we keep looking for new solutions." The treaty terms were simple but far-reaching. The Zephyrians would withdraw from all human territories and pay reparations for the damage they had caused. In exchange, humans would share some of their electromagnetic interference technology to help the Zephyrians defend against other threats in their region of space. But Jack Morrison was not finished with the war. The victory at Earth had saved humanity, but it had also revealed something important. The Zephyrian Empire was vast, controlling hundreds of star systems. There were other conquered species out there, other worlds that had been enslaved or destroyed. We cannot just stop here, Jack said during a meeting with the human leadership. The Zephyrians have been conquering worlds for centuries. There are dozens of species that need our help. Admiral Morrison, our priority must be rebuilding human civilization, argued Colonel Adams, who had become more supportive of Jack's methods after their success. We have lost so much in this war, we need time to recover. The best way to secure our future is to make sure this never happens again, Jack countered. We need to help the other conquered species gain their freedom. If we do not, the Zephyrians will just rebuild their empire and come back stronger. Amy Clark, now promoted to Admiral herself, supported Jack's position. We have the technology and the knowledge. More importantly, we have proof that the Zephyrian military can be defeated. Other species will join us if we show them how to fight. The debate continued for weeks, but eventually Jack's view prevailed. The newly formed Human Liberation Fleet began reaching out to resistance movements on conquered worlds. They shared the electromagnetic interference technology and helped coordinate attacks on Zephyrian outposts. The liberation campaigns took 3 more years. Each world was different. Each species had its own strengths and weaknesses, but the basic principle remained the same. The Zephyrians could be defeated if their enemies were willing to think differently and fight. Unconventionally, Jack found himself commanding a fleet that included not just human ships, but vessels from a dozen different species. The Krill, who lived in gas-giant atmospheres, provided ships that could generate electromagnetic storms. The Nexari, a silicon-based species, created jamming devices that could disrupt Zephyrian communications. The Valdris, who had been fighting a guerrilla war for decades, shared their knowledge of Zephyrian military tactics. The final battle of the war took place at Zephyr Prime, the Zephyrian homeworld. It was not the massive fleet engagement that everyone expected. Instead, it was a carefully coordinated operation that shut down the planetary defense grid and forced the Zephyrian leadership to negotiate. Jack stood in the same room where the first peace treaty had been signed, but this time he was not alone. Representatives from 23 different species sat around the table, each one a former victim of Zephyrian conquest. The age of empire is over, Jack announced to the assembled delegates. From now on, all species will be free to determine their own destiny. The Zephyrians will retain their homeworld and a small number of colonies, but they will never again be permitted to conquer other worlds. Zethka, who had become something of an ally over the years, nodded his agreement. We understand now that conquest is not strength. We thought power came from superior technology and overwhelming force. You taught us that true power comes from cooperation and adaptation. After the formal ceremonies, Jack found himself alone, on the observation deck of his flagship, looking out at the stars. The war was over, but he felt no sense of triumph. Too many people had died, too many worlds had been destroyed. The victory had come at an enormous cost. Maria Santos joined him at the window. She had become his closest advisor over the years, helping to coordinate the civilian fleets that had proven so effective in the liberation campaigns. What happens now? She asked. Now we go home, Jack replied. We rebuild, we remember, and we make sure this never happens again. Do you think it will work, this alliance between all the different species? Jack considered the question carefully. I think it has to work. The alternative is too terrible to contemplate. We have all seen what happens when one species decides it has the right to rule over others. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, Maria spoke again. You know, when this all started, you were just an engineer trying to keep the ship running. Now you're the most famous human in the galaxy, Jack smiled. I am still just an engineer. I just found a better way to solve the problem. The journey back to Earth took 2 months. When Jack's ship entered the solar system, they found a world that was already rebuilding. New cities were rising from the ashes of the old ones. Space stations were being constructed to handle trade with the newly liberated worlds. Children who had grown up during the war were now adults, ready to build a better future. Jack Morrison returned to Earth as a hero, but he carried with him the knowledge that heroism was not about superior weapons or advanced technology. It was about refusing to give up, about finding new solutions when the old ones failed, and about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when their survival depended on it. The war that everyone else had lost became humanity's greatest victory, and the lesson they learned would guide them for generations to come. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from power, but from the willingness to think differently when everything seems hopeless.